So let's continue here. Some years ago, there was a survey in Scientific American when they asked the leaders, top leaders in the world, what is the likelihood some very important world-changing events. These are those events. For example, the big one, the big earthquake in California, or the synthetic life, or self-aware machines, or extra dimensions, or aliens, or human cloning, or so on. Nuclear war, for example. There is a list of potential threats for our existence. And among them was the self-aware machines. What do you think, what the experts said? It is likely or not? Think about it, and I will show you the answer. This is the Big Bang. Very likely. The next one is the synthetic life. Also very likely. Self-aware machines. Here it is. Also very likely. And I believe we are very close to that because of the artificial intelligence and so on. It is very fascinating. And then I like to just skip this. If you're interested, you can watch it at home and think about it. But now I like to show you the main trend in IT. Way back, let's say 50 years ago, it was not obvious the world is changing exponentially. But there was a practical law, so-called Moore's law. One of the famous guys at Intel predicted the computation power. Actually, that time he said the transistors in the computers will double in every year. Since the information processing element was the transistor way back, if the number of transistors are evolving exponentially, the computational power also evolves exponentially, something like that. We will see the result these days. We can use these extremely powerful smart machines in our pocket. And the knee of this curve was just some decades ago. And because we are above of this knee, we feel this exponential growth. Before that, it was almost linear. This area at the beginning, it was almost linear here, like this here. Our parents felt the world is improving, but just gradually. Now these days, we feel it is improving exponentially, extremely fast like that. This is the curve of the Moore's law, showing the number of transistors doubling every 1 or 2 years or something like that. This is how the evolution of the computation power. You noticed the scale is logarithmic here, not linear. That's why it seems kind of linear, but it is exponential. Because there is 1 and 10 and 100 and 1,000 on a scale like that. What is the consequence of that? Ray Kurzweil, one of the leaders in this field, coined a phrase or a name for that called technical singularity, meaning that point where we cannot see beyond. It is extremely fascinating. And I spend most of my time in these days to study on the internet. I retired some years ago, and I'm in a very fortunate situation. I can schedule my time most of the time, and I spend most of it with studying. And a good thing, I can study for the best ones, because everything is available. I can go to the internet, and if I know the right channels, I can learn from the top leaders. For example, I'll just show you one example here. For example, if I want to see what is the opinion of Ray Kurzweil of this singularity, and I can go and listen to it. Let's do it just for very briefly. Let's go there, find this list, and here it is.
Well, we'll have computers that are powerful enough to simulate the human brain, but we won't be finished yet with reverse engineering the human brain and understanding its methods. One of my main themes, and I've developed this thesis over 30 years, is that information technology grows exponentially. The power of computers, our understanding of the human brain, the spatial resolution of brain scanning, the number of bits we move around the internet. I mean, many different measures of information technology double every 1 year, every 11 months, 13 months, depending on what you're measuring. So these technologies will be 1 million times more powerful within 20 years. 20 years. In fact, the speed of exponential growth is itself speeding up. So in 25 years, these technologies will be 1 billion times more powerful than they are today. And we've already seen that kind of progress. When I was an undergraduate, we all shared a computer at MIT that took up half a building. The computer in your cell phone today is 1 million times cheaper and 1,000 times more powerful. That's a billion-fold increase in price performance of computing since I was an undergraduate. By 2029, and I've been quite consistent on this date, we will have completed the reverse engineering of the human brain. And we've already made very good progress on that. We've reverse engineered a number of different regions, like the cerebellum, which is responsible for our skill formation, and slices of the cerebral cortex where we do our recursive thinking, and the auditory cortex, the visual cortex, and so on. By 2029, we'll have reverse engineered and modeled and simulated all the regions of the brain, and that will provide us the software, algorithmic methods to simulate, all of the human brain's capabilities, including our emotional intelligence. And computers at that time would be far more powerful than the human brain. And we'll be able to create machines that really do have the subtlety and suppleness of human intelligence. And they'll combine that power with ways in which machines are already superior to us. They can harness all of human knowledge with a few keystrokes. They can remember billions of things accurately. They can share knowledge at electronic speeds that are 1 million times faster than human language. So it'll be a very powerful combination. But the last point I'll make is that it's not some alien invasion of intelligent machines coming from Mars to invade us. It's coming from within our civilization, and the whole point of it is to extend our reach. Ever since we picked up a stick to reach a higher branch, we've used our tools to extend our reach. We can now already extend our reach mentally. I can take out a device from my pocket and access all of human knowledge with a few keystrokes. Half the farmers in China have these devices and can do the same thing. It is spawning a real cultural revolution in China and around the world. And these tools are continuing to grow exponentially in power. The singularity is not just that point where we achieve human level of intelligence in the machine. And that will start a new revolution where these machines will continue to grow exponentially in power. They'll be able to actually improve their own software design. By 2045, we'll have expanded the intelligence of our human-machine civilization 1 billion-fold. That will be singularity. And we borrow this metaphor from physics to talk about an event horizon that's hard to see beyond.
What do you think? How far are we from the singularity point? What the expert says? What do you think?
In years.
Excuse me?
In years.
In years, yes.
15, maybe.
20, 30, 40, something like that. This is the estimation. If you are skeptical, this 40 years is shifting continuously. But it is hopefully in our lifetime. Not in a far distant future in our grandchildren, in our lifetime. Unbelievable. We need to cope with it. To be able to cope with it, we need to be adaptive. You need to be adaptive. You need to study continuously. You need to learn efficiently how to study. If not, that knowledge what you have, useless. Nobody will pay for that. And to be in a flow stage, what I told you, to be in a flow stage, you need to utilize your skills. And those skills should be something up to date, but somehow address some recent problems. And if you can solve those problems efficiently, even if it is very hard, you can enter to this flow stage. And it will be really fun, and you will achieve your life goal if you want. So something like that. I hope it is not boring for you to watch these videos, and I will encourage you to watch it. go back for the presentation. You can watch it at home if you like. That time, in 2005, Ray Kurzweil published a book. He said singularity is near, very close, in decades. And it is still there. But hopefully, or potentially, this future is closer for us. Just one mention, one interesting thing for me. Ray Kurzweil is the head of the Singularity University, but Google paid for that. Google founded the Singularity University in the US. And unbelievable place, because those people who are at the Singularity University dealing with the largest human problems, how to target and how to solve those problems. Energy problems, probably pandemic problems these days. And just one example of what was shocking for me, the Singularity University had a meeting here in Budapest some years ago at the Music Academy. What do you think, how much was the entry fee? It was a 2 days long conference meeting. Those main leading experts came to Hungary, sat around a round table, and discussed the state of the art in that field, in the AI field. What do you think, how much was the entry fee? Guess. In dollars. 2 days long conference. 2 days long conference was. Tell you, $4,000 for the conference to get in. And the Music Academy was full of people who was knowledgeable enough to understand what he's talking about. It was a shocking experience for me to learn. So we have this exponential growth, and we need to learn how to deal with it. It is not easy, and there are several threats, because just like a double-edged sword, it can be very useful for us. We can enjoy, for example, talking with this machine. Great. We can listen to music if it is allowed here to listen to music, or we can watch TV on it if you want. We can discuss using any kind of social media platforms to talk to our friends or family members. It's really fascinating. But in the same time, there is a very big danger in it, because this machine communicates all the time. To be able to understand my command, for example, Alexa, how is the weather in Budapest? Alexa, how is the weather in Budapest, Hungary?
In Budapest, it's 11 degrees Celsius with mostly cloudy skies. Today, you can look for intermittent clouds, with a high of 13 degrees and a low of -1 degrees.
Because the speech recognition is not done here, it is done in the US. So they need to send my whole speech, what I'm doing here. So it is there. If somebody has a bad intention, can get my information and can figure out what I told, and it can use against me if I'm not careful enough. And it is done continuously. So we gave up for the convenience of privacy, because it is very convenient, great to use it. I can turn on the light at home, still laying in bed, and I should, okay, switch on the light, and I can tell which light I want to switch it on. But at the same time, those people who manage this can monitor my whole life, can tell what I did yesterday, what time, how many times, or something like that. So there's always a trade-off. Let me mention one other literature what I wanted to show you, if you have time to read it. I encourage you to do that. For example, this one here. This one here.
What does it mean to be a featherless, two-legged, linguistically conscious creature?
Please raise your hand if you know what TED is. Great, thank you. I hope you enjoy it sometimes. It can be overwhelming to watch too many TED Talks in a day, but sometimes it can select well. You can enjoy it and you can learn a lot from it.
The rise of the machines. here is scared of killer robots? I am. I used to work in UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. And all I could think seeing these things is that someday somebody is going to strap a machine gun to these things and they're going to hunt me down in swarms. I work in robotics at Brown University and I'm scared of robots. Actually, I'm kind of terrified. But can you blame me? Ever since I was a kid, all I've seen are movies that portray the ascendance of artificial intelligence and our inevitable conflict with it. 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Terminator, The Matrix, and the stories they tell are pretty scary.
So this talk starts with the fantasies, these dreams, what was produced in films. But later on, if you will watch that, you will see the reality, what is in these days, what kind of surveillance we have, what kind of systems around us on an everyday basis, what we can use or suffer.
They're about 5 years out from coming up with a standard. These systems are being used now. Not just in loans, but they're being used in vehicles, like I was saying. They're being used in things like cooperative adaptive cruise control. It's funny that they call that cruise control, because the type of controller used in cruise control, a PID controller, was used for 30 years in chemical plants before it ever made it into a car. The type of controller that's used to drive a self-driving car in machine learning, that's only been used in research since 2007. These are new technologies. We need to demand the standards and we need to demand regulation so that we don't get snake oil in the marketplace. And we also have to have a little bit of skepticism. The experiments in authority done by Stanley Milgram after World War II showed that your average person would follow an authority figure's orders, even if it meant harming their fellow citizen. In this experiment, everyday Americans would shock an actor past the point of him complaining about heart trouble, past the point of him screaming in pain, past the point of him going silent in simulated death. All because somebody with no credentials in a lab coat was saying some variation of the phrase, "The experiment must continue." In AI, we have Milgram's ultimate authority figure. We have a dispassionate system that cannot reflect, that cannot make another decision, that there is no recourse to, that will always say the system or the process must continue. Now I'm going to tell you a little story. It's about a car trip that I took driving across country. And
So this guy belongs to that group who is mainly against AI progress. We can understand it is a great thing, but there are some potential threats, what we need to deal with it. And his talk is mainly focused on those interesting areas. I encourage you to watch it at home, if you like. Going back to the presentation, here is the list what we can mean intelligence. Not easy answer for that, because intelligence is a very complex feature, not only ours. My view is not only human can be intelligent. Creatures, animals, can be very intelligent too, depending on the task, what they need to solve. Sometimes we are very good in symbolic thinking, but we are not very good to navigation, especially in the dark. We cannot see, or we don't know the territory. Creatures, for example, rats are very good for navigations, or birds are very good for navigations. because they had a different system, different sensory system, different control system in their brain to somehow handle the situation. We can ask this question, knowledge is the intelligence. Not, if somebody knows a lot, maybe not intelligent. Or speed, how fast it can be done, who knows? Accuracy, not really. Computation power, it is a very important element of it. It is a very complex skill, the intelligence. Basically, if I need to tell it very briefly, very shortly, it is a problem-solving ability. Question, what kind of problems? Simple problems, humans the best in it. But so far, very close future, computers will be much better of it. Because if you will see the next slide here, there is a problem here in this field, the so-called moving target problem, meaning that there is a list of tasks what was considered as an intelligent task way before, the way 20 years ago or 30 years ago. For example, fast calculation. The first computer was built to build the very fast calculating machine, to calculate, for example, trajectories, arterial trajectories, or predict the weather. Or fast search. Google was made for making a good fast search. Or speech generation. We can experience these days. It is so good, almost cannot tell it is a machine generated or not. Especially our cell phone, where we are listening to our friend's voice. It's a generated speech. It is not just a transmitted speech. There is a voice generator in it, using some formats, using some elements of the speech of our friend, and then reconstructing that voice in our speaker. Language translation. These days it is unbelievable how good is it. Or face recognition. It can recognize person not just from face, from up and down. Where my ears are, what is my head size, how is my posture. Many years ago, when I was fortunate to go in the US and meeting one of the leading person in the face recognition field and ask him the dumb question, sir, can you tell me when it will be almost 100% efficient, the face recognition? And his answer was, he turned back, said, it is done. It was many decades ago. That time it was just an experimental system. These days it is on a cell phone. If you don't want to use your password or keys, you can recognize your face and it is more or less okay. Even this little machine, and the recognition is done here in the cell phone, not in a system somewhere in a network or cloud. It is done in this little machine. Music composition, it is also done by computers usually. Sometimes it is better than the real situation. I mentioned this Singularity meeting in Budapest some years ago. One of the very interesting, fascinating area was in this meeting to told us there is a machine-generated music will be played here by musicians, real musicians. One piece was generated or composed by a composer. Another was composed by a computer. We need to listen very carefully for these two pieces of music and vote which one was generated by a computer. And there were several hundred people sitting in a music academy in Budapest and giving our answer for that, and we were wrong. So we told that piece was generated by computer and the opposite was generated by computer. So it is something like that. But the question is here, then what is intelligence? Because if those are just the elements, not easy to answer for that. If we will list the different creatures, where we will put the level of intelligence? We will put it here, humans, or we will put it here, mammals, or we will put it here, bugs, or where? My view is the following. Like this. This is my view. The intelligence is not like that. It is not a step function Under that, it's a dumb thing, we can eat it. And above that point, we cannot eat it because it is smart. So this is the situation, I think. Something like that. Question always that what we watch, what we are analyzing. If it's a specific task, for example, how to fly efficiently, it is no question that this little creature can fly extremely efficiently. Not this one. Just go back for very quick. Here, this one. Many, many thousand years old creature. The evolution somehow produced something fantastic, meaning that it didn't change ever since. The same creature was alive in a Euro period, thousand years ago. Because it is so efficient. It can reproduce, it can live perfectly. It can navigate extremely fast in a forest and in between the grass field, in a grass. To build such a robot, it is impossible these days. Especially just suck a little piece of sugar and fly it for minutes with that, instead of carrying a big battery on his shoulder or back. So something like that, this is the intelligence, what I think. And the creatures can be intelligent too. And the machines too. But question how much? There is a very important question, very important differentiation between intelligent things. Please understand it and be able to answer to your friend. What is the weak intelligence and a strong intelligence? There is a technical term. The very short answer for that, the strong intelligence tries to replicate the humans. Self-consciousness and just like humans do, solving problems. We are not there yet, but we are close. The weak intelligence will solve some specific problem. These days, the weak intelligence is much better than us. How to control something, how to calculate something, how to search something. We cannot compete with them. There are a list of very complicated games, chess, Go, or something like that. There is no human person who can beat those machines these days. Maybe using some extreme, unfortunate steps, but if you need to repeat it, the average will be much more for the machines than for the humans. The next question, those machines are better than us in that sense. The question how we define, how to measure intelligence. This is the next thing what I like to cover very briefly. There is a evolution of how we define intelligence. You can read those people's name, and I just mentioned one element of it. For example, Okay, thank you. I misunderstood something. So, for example, in the 1800s there was a person who defined the so-called craniometry, meaning that if we measure the size of the head of the person based on the forehead and based on the ears and the nose and the lips or something like that, we can tell how smart a person is. They use statistical data, and based on these measurements, they made very far-reaching conclusions. Just looking at someone, you can tell he or she is smart or not. As you know, our thinking is very biased, because the biases, human biases, can help us to make quick, fast decisions. So somehow we are using this biased opinion to judge someone. It is our very important built-in feature, our feature. But to make good, right decisions, we need to fight against it. Think and evaluate and analyze before sending or telling a very fast decision. If you would see a person whose forehead is something like that, and then his eyebrows would be connected like that, very likely he would think the person is very dumb, especially having a big jaws, something like that, like a monkey. It's the same thing if you will see a computer, you will see a big box, very powerful big box. You can tell it's a big computer, it's a very powerful one. without seeing what kind of graphical card in it, what kind of processor is in it, how much memory in it, we cannot tell anything. But since our practice somehow shows us the correlation between the large computer and a big power and small computer and a little power, we can make a fast decision, just taking a look of it. But we need to analyze it and need to use our best judgment to form our final opinion. And this is a list of different persons who made something for defining intelligence. Very important element of it we are talking about very often, so-called IQ. Very important to know. The intelligence is a feature, IQ is a number. Intelligence is our ability to solve problems efficiently. If we are talking about strong AI, strong intelligence, then we are using these conscious decisions. But how we can tell to someone how good I am or how good you are? We need to find a reference. Because using this reference, we can tell he or she is smarter than the average. This is what the IQ tells us. Because we are referring to the average. And how to do that? We need to make a specific task, specific test, some kind of test in it, some kind of elements of it to test with a person, and then somehow measure those achievements, those performance, and add it together, and form an average. And based on this average value, I can test a person and compare his or her results to the average, and telling how far this person is from the average. If the person falls into the average, we can tell he's an average IQ person. His IQ, since we are dividing with the average value, it can be 1. But if we want to somehow have it a little larger, we multiply it by 100. And I will show you in a second. This is how the IQ is calculated. Test points divided by the age group test average points, multiplied by 100. This is the IQ. To having a 100 IQ, this is meaning the average. The person is average. His mental ability is close to the or average. If somebody has 120, meaning that he is better than the average. Question, how far are we from this average? Since the complex features in our world usually show a so-called standard distribution, just like a bell curve, something like that. Something is a middle high, and going far away from the average, it is lower and slower. There is a special curve called bell curve. The bell curve, the test, the intelligent test somehow formed to somehow test this kind of ability, how to solve problems. And then the average of this value is in the middle, and then more or less of the average is something on a curve at the sides. So when we are testing one person, we can see this here. We are dividing the test points with the average points, and then this is how it looks, like this here. Within one deviation, standard deviation, these are the average people. These are the little better IQ person. This is the much better ones. There is a traditional way to put people in these groups, as you will see here. If the person's value is somehow within this 91 and 109, meaning that within this standard deviation point, within this range, we can tell this person is average intelligent. If somebody is above that, you can see how much is above, then we can tell the person is very smart or the person is very dumb. Very important to know these days, to use IQ test, it is not legal in most countries. Let me tell you again, it is not legal, against the law. Question why? Because using this single test, measuring only the performance, the mental performance, can somehow relate it to the social status of the persons. how wealthy is the group of people who this person is belong to. And then based on the IQ, it is easy to tell differences between social groups. And it is not a human value. It is just a fact. Somebody cannot perform so well because of the background. Not because he or she is dumb, his brain is not good enough, because his situation was not good enough when the person grown up. That's why using just only IQ test, it is not legal in most countries. Of course, as one element of the personal testing can be used, but not as a deciding point to hire someone. Way back, for example, 100 years ago, it was basic element to decide somebody will go in the military to be an officer or not. If somebody was below some IQ level, was not able to go there because he said the person is dumb. And we don't need dumb people. But it's very important to understand the test measures what the test was made for. For example, there is the Wechsler test. I will encourage you to learn what is that. It measures some specific skills, mental abilities, but doesn't test the music at all, doesn't test the motor skills, how well a person can dance, for example, how the person can balance very well, how can move, how efficiently can move. So the Wechsler test, the standard IQ test, measures only one specific part of the skills. If you need to find someone who is very good in motor skills, the Wechsler test is not good for that because there are no test features in it, no test elements in it. There is a very important situation what we face. There was a psychologist, his name was Flynn, defined a very interesting problem. Testing persons for long term, they learned the average increases by time. Meaning that the young kids are smarter than the old parents. This is called the Flynn Effect. Meaning that we are smarter than our ancestors. My understanding in this field, not because our brain is much different or different, our brain is the same, more or less, but the connectors are different in it. Before we are testing our skills on a daily basis, we are using games, we are using computers, we are using smartphones all the time. So using this kind of problems, we are better than our ancestors, our grandparents, for example. But we are not improving our physical skills at all. If there would be a test to measure how good is our manipulation, it will be not better at all than our parents. Maybe it will be much worse. To watch a movie these days, if you are in a 20s, you can watch much more frames per second than your parents, because your brain is somehow conditioned for that. And if you need to solve that kind of problem, that kind of visual problem, you are much faster, you can be much more efficient. If the test measures that specific skill, you will be smarter. Your IQ will be higher than your parents' IQ was. Clear? But the test measures only one specific area. There was a test conducted in the US a long time ago, surveying 12,000 young people in the age of 14 and 22 age group. And here is a list of results, very shocking results. The poverty is much more important and 15 times more probable in low IQ groups. So if somebody is dumb, will be poor. What is the answer for that? Or the prison sentence. The low IQ group was much more often in prison than the high IQ group. Of course, the explanation of these findings was very, very important and very controversial. What was the most controversial result of this test? That the white persons and the dark-skinned person's IQ was different. One was average 102, another was 87. And it is significant, meaning that there's such a major difference between black and white people. I don't want you to misunderstand my statement here. It is a false result here. Because it's measured one specific kind of skill, and because those social groups had a different kind of training in their life, they produced different results. But it is not a human value. And that's why this is one of the reasons why it is not legal to use only IQ tests to selecting people. There are some short list of goals what very important to build artificial systems, study artificial intelligence. I will conclude in a second. First, our main goal is to build a better computers. We want to build a better computers, but there's a secondary goal to understand human intelligence too. As you see, it is a complicated thing, and we are making a good progress in it to understand how to do it. And finally, this is the final thing what I'd like to mention very briefly in 1 minute. There is a very important human skill called emotional intelligence. Sometimes it is called AQ, but it is wrong because it is not a number. It is a list of skills how to handle social behavior. Just summarizing very briefly how I see it, the IQ, the mental skills how to solve problems, it is good for us to get in somewhere. Because if we can solve problems efficiently, we are valued. We can get a good salary, we can get a good job. But to stay there, to stay in, usually depends not on the intelligence level, rather the emotional intelligence, how to handle human problems, how to handle social relationships. The very short summary of what is the emotional intelligence is: know yourself, behave yourself, know others, and build bonds, how to behave. And I'd like to conclude with a short demonstration. One of my most favorite thing to do these days, to listen one of the service in the internet is called Blinkist. For me it is fantastic. I'm not a salesperson, though I don't want you to misunderstand me. I'm not a salesperson of Blinkist. But I'm using that in an everyday basis, enjoying so much, because I can listen to or read the summary of the most influential books in the world. Thousands of books available, and I can read it in minutes. Not just read it, I can listen to it. Let me show you a short demonstration. For example, here is a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and this is how it sounds.
Emotional intelligence, or EQ.
Let me connect
Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and understand your own feelings and the feelings of...
Just a second. I need to connect it to the speaker over there. Let's go back to the Blinkist.
Sure, a friend who's anxious. Why are certain people so good at this? The answer has to do with emotional intelligence, or EQ. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and understand your own feelings and the feelings of others, and influence those feelings to your advantage. A person who's good at reading people has high emotional intelligence. EQ combines 4 different elements. The first is self-awareness, or the ability to understand your own feelings and behaviors. The second is self-management. Self-management is about keeping yourself in situations in which you know you'll be able to behave correctly. The third is social awareness. Once you know how to manage your behavior and understand your feelings, you'll know how to read the emotions of others. You'll understand what makes people feel angry, sad, or excited, and you'll be able to better read body language.
And let me just...
The fourth and final element...
Just a short demonstration here. If I go here, I can select the half speed.
Final element is relationship management. Understanding your own behavior and the behavior of others.
If we are very slow somehow, like that, we can tune it back. But if we are a little faster, we can go up a little bit. Something like this.
or of others around you enables you to build stronger relationships with the important people in
It is a 75% of speed. This is the regular speed.
life. For example, if you know that one of your coworkers gets upset when he's criticized,
And I can speed it up even to 2, double speed.
you'll know how to give feedback to which he'll be able to respond more effectively. Let's take a closer look at the 4 elements of emotional intelligence. Keep listening.
Something like that. If you are interested, you can find one of these books and you can read it. And I think it is important to be informed in it. Thank you for your attention. See you next week. Thank you.